Welcome to episode 224 of the XS Noize Podcast, your go-to for deep dive conversations with the most compelling voices in music. I'm your host, Mark Millar. Thanks for listening. If you missed our last episode, I spoke with Tom Hickox about his cinematic new album, The Orchestra of Stories. Well worth a listen if you haven't already. Today's guest is Paul Connolly, frontman of the Wood Burning Savages, one of the most vital and outspoken bands to emerge from Northern Ireland. Their long-awaited second album, Hand to Mouth, is a raw, powerful response to personal struggles, health battles and political unrest. In this episode, Paul opens up about recovery, resilience and the stories behind the songs. This is Paul Connolly on the XS Noize Podcast. Hi, Paul. Welcome to the XS Noize Podcast.
Cheers, Mark. Thanks very much. How you doing?
Great to have you on. First off, congratulations on the release of the record, Hand to Mouth. It's been a long time since 2018 Stability, which made history at the Northern Ireland Music Prize as the first self-released album to win Album of the Year, and you also won Best Live Act. Did that success bring pressure or freedom heading into Album 2?
But of both, Mark. To be honest, it took us a long time to get this album out there. To be honest, for a load of reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into and we'll talk about. But off the back of the music prize, I was thinking about the night there a few weeks ago. I was chatting with some people that work on it and some friends that were at it and stuff. And I thought, whenever we won the live prize, I'm really proud of our live show and everything. Always have been. And I just thought, right. Won that, happy days, nice one. I'm really chuffed. I'm really humbled. I suppose I'll go and have a wee beer. And I went out to the bar then, and it as you do at that sort of thing, you get chatting to everybody. And then they were I didn't realize that they were calling out the albums. Then I was like, oh shit, I better start making my way back in. So I was making my way back in, chatting to people, and then we found out that we had won. Never thought that we would win it, like with a DIY album. That we made pretty much between ourselves and Rocky O'Reilly, and it was great. The thing about it was that it shines a light on music from here, and they won it. You know, there's even a wee bit more light kind of shone upon what it is that you've made, and we were delighted. It meant that we could tour. It meant that it was a bit of a buzz for us to sort of ask our booking agent that we were working with at the time, you know, can you look into getting us support dates or festivals and things like that? So in a nutshell, it sort of made things a bit easier. But as you say, there was a wee bit of pressure then to follow it up, to keep the quality up, and to really begin to think, well, what might the next thing look like when we get a bit sick of playing this set or these songs? What's the next thing that we want to say? And how do we best go about that? So it's definitely a bit of both after we won that.
And you've spoken recently about your serious health scare that stopped everything, you know, and how you're doing now, and what helped you most, you know, during recovery.
So that came out of the blue. I've never been in a hospital from the age of 6. I don't think I've got a wee scar in my head from when I was running about acting aged when I was a kid, and hadn't been in a hospital. And the way that sort of came about, we were on tour, kind of around the UK. It was a really nice tour. We were playing in places that we hadn't played before, and we were playing to nice crowds and you know, a couple of sellout shows and everything. So on paper, it was our best tour that we had put on by ourselves. But I started feeling really ill, started feeling really sick. I couldn't eat, and I basically started sort of wasting away. And eventually, you know, after we got off the tour, I was like, I can't even lift a guitar here. I literally feel like I'm fading away. Went to the doctor, couldn't figure it out. I got put on waiting lists. The way that the NHS is at the minute, through no fault of anybody's working on the front line of the NHS, you know, the waiting lists were really, really long to figure out what it was. So had to wait in scans, had to wait in all sorts of, like, every sort of scan imaginable, and then needed a bit of surgery as well. And that sort of put me on the bench Basically, I couldn't do anything, couldn't work. My day job is in workshop facilitation with young people, getting them interested in music, getting them interested in art, and all those sorts of things as a means of expression. And I love it. I really, really do. I love it. I've been doing that for about 10 years. So to not be able to gig and not be able to work and not be able to bring in any money was a really, really scary time. So the thing that helped me was a lot of it was down to my partner, Moran. A lot of it was down to friends. A lot of it was down to people checking in and noticing that something was up and saying, are you all right? What's going on? So being able to talk with them about what was going on and that really sort of got me through. And just before that point, we had started recording the album as well. And, we'd come out the back of COVID. We sort of had to sit in our hands. And then we had a couple of years where things were getting back to normal. We were sort of thinking, let's get the record going, let's get the album finished. Tours were coming up, gigs were coming up, so all that sort of stuff. It's kind of hard to ride three horses at once. You've got your band, within that you've got gigs and recording, and then you have to look after yourself and your own sort of. I mean, everybody's day jobbing and everybody's working, and paying the bills. So it was hard to go from trying to race with three horses to sort of sitting watching everything going you by. So or going by you. But yeah, that was it was definitely people, and a lot of that was friends and the NHS staff as well, the doctors and consultants and nurses and stuff. I had to spend quite a bit of time in hospital too. So yeah, it was that. And besides that, it was music. It was going back and listening to records that I hadn't listened to since I was a teenager, and it was trying to write stuff. I do wee bits and pieces for the BBC now and again. I do this thing, and it's usually religious folk. I'm not religious in the least. Say I'm fairly agnostic or atheist or whatever it is. But there's a wee section on the radio where they get people, sometimes people who are like, they might be priests or it might be clergy people or whatever, quite religious, spiritual people, to sort of write a wee thought for the day and stuff like that. So I got asked to do those every now and again when I was ill, and I really enjoyed writing them. Like I'm just some idiot with a guitar, and it was nice to be asked to do it as a musician who's quite vocal about separating church and state and all those sorts of things. So doing that and getting back into writing, just writing for the sake of writing, not even for the sake of finishing a song. All that sort of stuff kept me head right, basically.
And how are you now? Are you feeling 100% now?
I'm kind of, yeah. I figured out like what I need to do. It's a lifelong condition that I'll have to live with. So I figured out a treatment plan and figured out what I can do and what I can't do, and I'm feeling good now. I'm a wee bit heavier than I was even before I got sick, so I'm kind of happier for that too. Because there was a point there. There was a point where it was really, really scary. I went down to 6 stone, and I literally like getting off the sofa and going out into the garden and just sitting was like, it was like Frodo going to destroy the ring. It was like an epic journey, sort of. Like I was really frail, and kind of made me very grateful for the really, really day-to-day minute things that we take for granted a lot of the time. So now I'm feeling, thankfully, touch wood, I'm feeling really, really good. So cheers. Thank you for asking.
Well, let's talk about the album. Let's bring that emotional journey into the songs themselves. You've always walked the line between personal storytelling and social commentary. Was there a conscious shift inward with this album?
I think so. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. With the first album that we did, Stability, that one was, I mean, even from the album art that was done by Conor McClure and Alice Cinnamon, the sort of thought there was try and imagine how bad things can get. Try and imagine what might happen if this law gets passed. Try and imagine what might happen if these people get voted in, whether that's from complacency where people don't get up and vote, or whether it's from apathy, or whether it's worse from people who actually believe a lot of the right wing stuff that we try and kick against. So that album was trying to imagine what might happen. And in the case of Hand to Mouth, especially, coming off the back of COVID, regardless of whether before COVID or during, you were in a good place financially. Coming out the back of it, a lot of people were literally living hand to mouth and still are living hand to mouth. You know, my ourselves included, like, you know, in terms of the band for the work that we were doing at the time and working at. So I think that inward sort of reflective sort of thing, even before I became ill, that was something that was on my mind, because Stability was sort of a big widescreen album where it was like, imagine this, imagine that happened. Whereas this one was more like, oh, it is happening. This has happened. You know, it's conversations that we're having with our friends and family. It's conversations that you're having with strangers. It's things that you're hearing people say in passing that, you know, either A, terrifies you, B, makes you feel serious sympathy and empathy, or C, in the case of some people, it's stuff that you actually put your hand up and say, hold on, where are you coming from? Why do you think that's acceptable? Yeah, with this album, really it was about thinking about the conversations and the things that I've overheard from people in day to day.
Yeah, it's a fantastic album. I mean, each song hits in its own way. You know, the album opens with "Grind Your Teeth." You know, it opens with a real urgency. Why
Yeah,
did you lead with that one?
opened with that one because it sort of, like, I don't want to I don't want to sound like Brian May or something and be like, oh, you know, every Queen album opens with like an overture or something. But you know, every sort of big theater piece or classical piece, it's that overture sort of thing where you're sort of like, here's what you can expect if you sit and listen to this album as a continuous thing, which I know is another discussion in itself. But we wanted to sort of let people know from the get go that it was a sort of statement of intent that this is an angry album. It's a really bleak album. It's a really depressing album in places. And I think we had it hard with that one, because I think with this album, Stability was, you know, Stability is an alternative rock album, but this one we sort of leaned even heavier into the guitars and the sort of industrial sounds. So for the first 3 and a bit minutes of the length of the album, we wanted to let people who are hearing it think, "Holy shit, this is you know, they've really amped it up and knocked it up a gear here."
Yeah, yeah, you have absolutely. You know, record of achievement. I mean, it's your latest track from the album. It questions meritocracy and feels like a real emotional release. And it was also the last song recorded. What made it feel like the missing piece?
Like I was sort of saying there with the album, it's pretty heavy, and it's, you know, it's really guitar heavy as well. And like I'm as aware as anybody that there's a saturation of, you know, four white fellas with guitars trying to do the heavy thing and trying to call out like social injustices and various degrees of, you know, it landing in different ways with different people, I suppose. But the thing was that we didn't want to go out and make a metal album in that sort of sense, or something that people might mistake for a metal album. So not that there's anything wrong with that. Like, my favorite band's Black Sabbath. Like, I love metal. I couldn't live without it. I don't think any of us in the band could, but we wanted to kind of put in something, because we were in the studio with Rocky O'Reilly. We were in Start Together Studios. We sort of had all these toys at our disposal, and we had Rocky's sort of expertise as well, and like, he's a wizard as well. He's sort of like, he's like the best person, I think, for us to sort of capture things and to push you on. So I think when we sat down and thought, this is missing something, we listened to what was already there, and we realized that there was a lot of electronic sort of elements creeping in. And we sort of thought, well, let's give those elements and the stuff that we're playing about with here, let's write a song that sort of leans really into that from its complete genesis, from its you know, trying to pull the rabbit out of the hat sort of time. And we sort of made something that sort of, it's got a, I know like a lot of bands say it's got a bit of a talking heads thing, but it's definitely got a lot of that sort of thing going, for the fact that it uses a lot of 80s technology and drum machines and synths and samples. So we wanted to write something quite electronic to challenge ourselves a wee bit. And then, just in terms of what I was listening to at the time when we were trying to come up with that, I think we were listening to a lot of Nine Inch Nails, but also stuff like LCD Sound System, where he's, you know, James Murphy sort of really nails a lot of stuff in his lyrics where he's talking about getting a wee bit older, what the expectations are that you should have achieved by that time. And then I was sort of thinking about like jobs that I'd worked before and people that I'd met when I was living, like just getting ready to sort of move out of Derry. I was working in a call center, and it was just a really horrible environment, and it was sort of like it was like a battery hen house really, and it was just, people were burning themselves out and trying to do something for somebody they'd never met, and it just it gives me the sort of gives me the ick, for want of a better phrase, to be wasting your time doing something that you really don't like. And I know everybody has a job, or everybody who works has to do stuff that they find a bit monotonous and tedious and stuff sometimes. But to go in every day and to do that, and then for your only outlet to be just going and getting completely tubed, and just sort of being like, right, where am I going here? Because if I stay here, I might get this position, or I might move on to that, or like where is it going? So that sort of spiral of that, and then as you say, meritocracy as well, of feeling like you deserve a bit better, and a bit better doesn't necessarily mean a big flash car and a big flash house and whatever. A bit better just means a bit more time for yourself and a bit more enjoyment out of your life and out of the friendships and relationships that you cultivate as well. So that's where that song comes from.
Is that what you're also touching on as well on Climb the Ladder?
Yeah, well, climb the ladder. I had sort of had the lyrics in the bag for that one for a wee while. It's that's sort of our, say the right things when electioneering. That's what I was sort of thinking with that one, and it's sort of like at the time when we were writing it, it was still Rishi Sunak, and if that feels like a billion years ago now, but at the time, we were seeing people like Suella Braverman and Priti Patel and all these folks in the Tory party sort of just really being barefaced liars and just saying stuff for the sake of riling people up on one side to distract them, and then saying other things to feed into this maelstrom of hate that people at that time were really, and still are to an extent, in a different gear, um, buying into and thinking, right, well, they're the one for me. But then the climb the ladder thing is that sort of notion of, you when they get up the ladder and then they turn around and go, right, sweet, I've got everything I need here now. I'll pull that ladder up behind me, and no imagination, no thoughts spared for any communities that have been devastated by cuts or anything like that. So that one was really about, it's that Pink Floyd sort of thing of "I'm all right, Jack. Keep your hands off my stack." That sort of thing, where it's like, I will amass as much as I possibly can and fuck everybody else, which really feels like the mantra of the Tories.
Well, there hasn't much changed, since Labour's got in either. It's pretty much the same, no matter the same agenda happens no matter what government's on.
No, I know, and just today at the time that we're recording this as well, is it the High Court or the Supreme Court? Sorry, have had a legislate or a ruling passed on trans people, and that's Labour. That I'm just shocked that we're seeing a lot of this stuff coming down the tracks under a Labour government, when the most marginalized people in our society are being held up as, as it's like a witch hunt or something. It's like the McCarthyite times where people are being, hunted and sort of made, all society's problems are being blamed on a minority of of the tiniest amount of people who have really nothing to do with any of society's problems. So it's as you say, yeah, it's Labour, but it's the Tory party by any other name. The disability cuts and everything as well. So whether it's their complete hands off approach on human rights, it's really, yeah, it's a bleak time that we're living in. I had thought by the time we finished the album, I knew in my bones that there was going to be a Labour government. They were saying a lot of the right things. So I sort of thought that this album would be completely defunct. It would be pointless by the time it came out, because, not naive to think that Keir Starmer and everybody would fix everything, because they can't. I don't think. But the album now with this government change rings even truer, because that cabinet of people are no longer, either A, part of the Tory party, or B, have gone into their own private interests even more so, and accrued and gained more money than ever. And especially if you look across the water, what's happening there with Trump and everything as well, and Elon Musk, it's just gone into overdrive now. So the album, there are lyrics on there that are even more relevant than when I wrote them. We have a track on there called "It Takes a Bomb to Raise a Village," and that one is about having a day off in, I think it was Carlisle. It was either Carlisle or Sheffield. It was somewhere way up north in England. And I had to go to the post office because I had to post a form for something really tedious. But anyway, so I was walking around this town, and I just kept seeing fellas about the same age as my wee brother, who's in his mid-20s now, dressed in sort of military stuff, and, handing out flyers and leaflets and asking people join up and be the best and all this sort of bullshit. And it just didn't really sit right with me that was what I was seeing more and more, and every time that we turned around. And there was a guy I got chatting to. I think I was waiting for the post office to open or something after their lunch, and this guy walked up to me. He was a nice guy. He was dressed like in the army or whatever, and he handed me a flyer, and I was sort of thinking like, I'm okay, man. And he was like, "Oh, would you not think about it?" And I was like, "Well, like I'm from Derry, and I have a complete aversion. I'll be honest. Like it's not something I would ever consider." And but thanks. I wasn't going to get in and start doorstepping him, because he's obviously just been sent out. But it was just thinking about that conversation and thinking about seeing that more and more on TV and stuff. But what I'm trying to get at is that song, "It Takes a Bomb to Raise a Village," that's sort of about the British arms trade and the American arms trade, and how they hold themselves up as these sort of amazing, virtuous places, when really, they're shelling people who are then having to leave the country, who are then, finding even increasingly more dangerous ways to get to the UK. And then when they get here, they're vilified by those same politicians who have interests in arms companies, and whose friends that they went to Eton and all these other bastard factories. Like, they've all got shares in these companies whenever you dig into it then, and or their wife or their husband or whoever does. So it's profiteering by any other name, really. So what we're seeing now is that's just gone into overdrive with everything that's happening, in Yemen and Gaza, and, across the world, really. So it's become even more relevant. So I had the fear that this album would be irrelevant, but in a nutshell, I'm finding some of the lyrics have become even more relevant.
Monument Valley, I have to say, it's my favourite track on the album. It's atmospheric, it's introspective. Where were you coming from there?
So I grew up in a part of Derry it's kind of in the middle of three different places, really. It's near Brook Park. So it was a road called Marlborough Road, which is technically in an area called Rosemount, which is beside Cregan, which is an enormous housing estate. And then that bottom part then is the Bogside. So I kind of grew up in the middle of this, and it was amazing. It was really, really, like, I had a really, like, no complaints childhood, really. It was, I was sheltered from a lot of stuff, and my folks worked like 2 and 3 jobs and stuff, and we kind of never really wanted for anything, and we were really lucky in that sense, because Derry has always been very deprived. In my heart and head, I feel like that's a political decision to deprive Derry, and I blame a lot of that deprivation on parties. I blame a lot of that on bigotry. Monument Valley is about living in Derry and growing up in Derry, and being exposed and being around and being related to people who can't see out of it because they haven't been given any hope when they're trying to make a life there. Monument Valley is sort of Derry's sort of naturally really hilly, and in the bog side there are a lot of there's Free Derry Corner. There's the murals that talk about the troubles and all the horrible things that happened then, and it felt like growing up. On every corner and every street wall, there's a mural. There was something to commemorate somebody who had died, or had been shot, or who had been murdered, or the murals are really they're they're very they tell the stories of what happened there. And then there's Free Derry Corner, so you're constantly seeing this whenever you live there. So that in my head is sort of like my Monument Valley. You're thinking about a Monument Valley in America, the States, the huge big stone formations where people come from all over the world to see that and to learn about how they formed. So the sort of thinking about that song was, I was thinking about the sort of people that I grew up with. And Derry also has a serious, I know all across Northern Ireland does. It's got one of the highest suicide rates in Europe. But Derry is sort of the epicenter of that, for want of a better term. And I was sort of thinking about all the people that aren't with us anymore, that I kind of grew up with and went to school with. And I was thinking about the situations that they've been put in because they weren't afforded the chance for, an education that sort of was fitting in the way that they wanted to go across with life, or any sort of job opportunities or anything like that. So what they were left with was a complete vacuum of pride in themselves and a complete inability to see any reason to keep living because Derry had ground them down so much, or their situation had ground them down so much. So I think I'm waffling a wee bit about it because it's a hard one to put into words, sort of. But Monument Valley is basically about deprivation in Derry.
And how do you feel about Derry now? You think it's it's thriving? Are there better opportunities nowadays for young people?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I think young people now, definitely the ones that I work with in my day job, they're a bit more urbane. They're a wee bit more international thinking. They're a bit more, I've seen stuff on the internet that I want to go out and experience. I want to go travel and I want to go and do this. And I think they're a bit, they're definitely a bit more, they've got a lust for life and everything, and they're not jaded, and they're not, they're not, for the most part of the kids that I teach and work with, they're not, downtrodden for, I really wish there was a better word of saying it there, but it's sort of, it falls on us to sort of keep that momentum up. It falls on us to sort of keep that spirit up and not make them jaded. So I think, Derry as a place, I love it. I'll always love it, but it's a place that's still being failed even now. Like I'm thinking about Gordon Lyons and some of the things that he's sort of done recently in Derry, where there have been backroom chats for a school to get money, which meant that another school which applied completely justly and fairly couldn't then be afforded that money because it had already been spent behind closed doors. And it's things like that that keep popping up in Derry. It's got a serious substance abuse problems, like a lot of places across the north, and housing there is pretty nigh on impossible. Like I'm living in Belfast, but just sometimes I'll look at the cost of things, or I'll look at the price of rent or the price of actual houses and think, how is this possible for Derry? Like what job, who's working these jobs that can afford this? So you're finding like the landlords buying places up. So there's a few streets in Derry that are owned by 2 or 3 people. So Derry's a place with a lot of problems, but what it does have is an amazing spirit and an amazing humor, and it's a really encouraging place. Speaking for the people in the creative arts and music there's a tenacity, and there's a sort of, we're going to keep going because we've always been making things on a shoestring, so we don't know any different. But I would love for that to change, and I would love for there to be more opportunities. So I think there's always a bit of a tinge of Derry in every song that we write.
You touch on landlord's prayer. You touch on the housing inequality.
Yeah, so landlord's prayer is sort of like it's a song about North and South, really, because my partner was living in Dublin for years. Whenever she's from France, she first moved over, and she was at uni here. Um, she was at uni in Dublin, and then graduated, was working for years, and then was renting. And one day the landlord turned around and went, "Hey, yeah, this rent. Here's what the new rent is." And it's just from chatting with a lot of friends, across all across this island. It's talking about that landlord sort of mentality that a lot of people have, or sorry, the mentality that a lot of landlords have, I should say. And just reading about like the Dáil and the South, where there's something like 2/3 of TDs. I'm gonna have to look this up, like the proper actual statistic. I can't remember it now, but if you look at a pie chart of the number of TDs in the Dáil, how many of those are landlords? And then if you made a pie chart of how many of those own 5 houses, 10 houses, 20 houses, 50, 100 houses, what's that pie chart look like then? It's disgusting. Like I'm of the belief that nobody should own, like if you're going to own a house or an apartment, you shouldn't have more than one. So it's a song about that. It's a song about things that I've read where, people are given landlords, selling sex in exchange for the roof over your head. It's a song about, like, it's a song about being a student and being a young adult, and living in some places that actually, on paper weren't inhabitable but were being rented out. It's a song about dodgy landlords, really. But the chorus says the gap just keeps on growing for the haves and the have-nots, and the goalpost just keeps shifting. And the goalposts do keep shifting. Whether that's landlords who are penalising people by putting the rent up, or by land banking, or holding houses empty, or whether it's the people who own houses, turn it into an Airbnb, where people come here for the culture, and people come here for a weekend, and people come here for things, which is good and has its place, but that's to the detriment of people who want to make a home there, or people whose home it sort of always has been. So it's a song about all of the above. I remember a few years ago I was renting a place in East Belfast, and I had to go and pick up the keys. And I went in, I went to this guy's house. His office was in his house, and he he was like, "All right, yeah, yeah," and he couldn't remember which house I lived in. And I was looking at him like, like paying you every month, and how do you not remember which house I live in? And then he was giving me the keys because the back door had maybe been changed or something like that, or maybe I anyway, a lock had been changed, and I had to go and pick up a key from the landlord. And I got there, and I've never seen so many fucking keys in my life. It was like the guy in the Matrix with the building full of keys. It was like, how many properties, which is a word that sickens me, how many houses do you own? How many of them have people living in them currently? How many of them are vacant? And how much do you make? And this guy was driving a nice car. And I took the bus to get there, and that just sort of stuck with me. I was like, I'm sickened. Like greed just, I know this I might sound really naive, but greed's just something that's always, always, always sickened me. That notion that you can never have enough. Landlord's prayer in a nutshell is really about having dodgy landlords, and really feeling very empathetic and sympathetic for a lot of people around me who, to various degrees, have worse.
You tackled body image and social pressure on Strict Ed. Why was it important to bring that theme into the album?
That one's a really important one, because again, we're sort of living in the age of sound bites from people like Andrew Tate and Conor McGregor, and this sort of launches a thousand ships of young men who are just, for want of a better word, they're completely maladjusted to society, and living this Instagram filtered life, and feel it's appropriate to say really disgusting things about the people around them, about the woman around them, about the trans people around them, about the people around them who are LGBTQ, or about anybody who isn't a straight white fella. So this song, Strict Diet, it's about that. It's about sort of the rise of that sort of bro culture that is really based upon hyper insecurity and won't somebody like me? Do you like me? All right, no, well, fuck you. Um, you know, I didn't want to like you anyway. So it's a song about that brainwashing that those two guys have, not just those two guys, but I'm sort of using those as the figureheads of this sort of movement. It's a song about that illusion that that these guys are sort of selling, because it's nowhere near what the real world is, or definitely should be. Yeah, strict diet. It's a satisfying one to sing that. And the worst thing about it is, when you do sing it, you're in a room full of people who agree with you, or a room full of people who agree with it. I wish I could just get one of those airplanes with a big ticker tape thing and just get some speakers somehow and just blast it over the top of Andrew Tate's house. Just sit in a wee Apache helicopter and just get some huge, big industrial speakers and just blare it on his stupid head all day long. And his brother as well. Yeah, it's because I see this sometimes at work with young people, kind of like that show Adolescence, where it's talking about the things that it touches on, where there are young men who sort of lock themselves away, get indoctrinated by this, and then feel like it's okay to talk to girls and women in this way. And it's about sort of the intervention that we have to do sometimes, where we're like, hey, you know, A, you can't talk to people like that. B, what did you expect to happen when you do talk to somebody like that? And C, I shouldn't have to say this, but what if that was your sister, your mother, your girlfriend, your whoever? How would that make you feel that there was somebody talking to them like that? It's sort of trying to nip that in the bud with young people as well. Yeah, it's it's about all of the above there, really.
Last of the legacies. It's a big reflective closer.
Mm.
What legacy you thinking of there?
So again, I was on a coffee break with, or tea break or whatever, with a friend of mine. He's a songwriter as well, called Paddy Nash, and he's a really good friend. He's an amazing songwriter, and he's a brilliant lyricist. And sometimes he just comes out with these quips, these lines that he'll just say something. I'll think, shit, I'm gonna write that down before he uses it. And we were standing there, and he was out the back of this place that we were working. It was a young people's project that we were working on, and he was just having a smoke out the back, and I was just standing there with a cup of tea, and it was a gorgeous day. Really, sun was splitting the rocks. It was like scalding hot, and the kids were all inside just jamming, making music, and running about, just having a ball. And it was a nice day. It was a nice day of work. I like I said at the start, loved that job. Loved doing that. And he turned around, he just sort of threw a curveball at me, and he went, you know what? My generation, maybe your generation, will be the last that leave any legacies. And I sort of thought, fucking hell. Like what does that mean? Like what do you mean by that? And he was like, no, just think about it, we're global warming, politically. And this is like maybe 4 years ago he said this. And I was sort of sitting on the line for a wee while on the lyric. And he was like, politically things are getting a bit weird. The rise of the far right, countries are beginning to sort of get riled up with each other. And, the legacy that you leave behind, in 100 years, nobody, it's a liberating thing to think that in 100 years after you're dead, nobody will remember you, which is a bonkers thought in itself. So as musicians or as artists or something, I think part of it, there's a bit of vanity that goes into it, where you're like, no, I really want to leave a legacy. I want to leave something behind that people people look at as even as a wee time capsule of what was going on. And he was like, I don't know, have a think about it. Have a think. I don't know. I think our generation will be the last one. And then we sort of started talking about data centers and about AI and about, how that's going to speed up the climate crisis. And, suddenly art, does it become more important? Does it become less important in times of complete disaster and chaos? Is it a luxury? So that song's sort of, it's partly about that. And then it's also, it's about sort of growing up, coming of age here in this country, on the edge of the UK, at the top of the island, on the far edge of Europe. There's nowhere to go but the sea then. So there's a feeling of isolation in that song as well. So even if you do leave a legacy, what's the point in pride, really? So it's a weird one. It's there's a few lyrics in there as well that I'm not, that sort of change meaning for me sometimes as well. But that one was a really nice one to record. And we sort of threw everything in the kitchen sink at that.
Yeah, it's a great track. It's a great way to end the album. Of all the topics you explore on Hand to Mouth, is there one that hits closest to home for you?
I've got a copy here because I'm packing them up to send them away to people that have ordered them. So I'm sort of thinking, like, they're all like, you probably hear this when you chat with people about their albums and about their music and songs, that everything sort of feels like a wee chapter and a longer, grander scheme of things. But I think, a lot of the songs on this are about poverty and about destitution that people have sort of been forced into through no fault of their own. A lot of the songs have that. And the song Strict Diet sort of feeds into a song that's earlier on in the album called 1,000 Mumbling Virgins, which is definitely about American incel culture. And, it's about unchecked power. And it's about, if somebody says something for long enough, then a lie, a really horrible lie, becomes the truth. So it's hard to know, really. I think, for the time that we're in it, I think, speaking here, I think Landlord's Prayer, maybe because I sort of look around at all of us and everybody needs a roof over their head, and homelessness rates are rising across the country, UK and Ireland. And there just seems to be no safety net. There seems to be no big government thinking in terms of repurposing buildings, in terms of seizing houses that have been left to basically sit and become more of an asset, more of an investment for people when they do sell them. So, I mean, just sort of thinking in that sort of way, maybe that song, and also just that sort of thing of climb the ladder. Climb the ladder when you've already. My thing about that song, Climb the Ladder, is that these people that I'm singing about are already halfway up the ladder to begin with. And they were put there and they were sort of given positions of power through nepotism or through, being born in the right sort of social circle or whatever it happens to be, inherited wealth and all those sorts of things, familial wealth and political influence and things like that too. And that really sickens me as well, because it makes a mockery of everybody that goes out to vote. So yeah, probably those two songs, Landlord's Prayer and Climb the Ladder.
What do you hope listeners take away from Hand to Mouth?
Whenever people listen to it, I hope that they feel, even though it's a really bleak album, I hope that people feel reassured that they're not going mad, that they're not, out by themselves. And I really, I always say this at gigs. I always think of our gigs as, I used to think of them as like sort of like an act of protest or something, but an act of protest doesn't really happen when you're in a room with people that agree with you. I sort of think of them as pit stops where people can go and meet people who are like-minded and going through a lot of the same things, and be reassured that they're not alone. So even though these times that we're all living in are hateful and cruel and bonkers and difficult. The feeling of unity and the feeling of community and the feeling of knowing that there are people there that you can talk to who might be able to point you in the right direction in some small way. I feel like maybe that's too much to sort of expect from an album, but I hope that people sort of feel reassured that they're not going mad, that it's actually really insane times that we're living in. So that, that more than ever, kindness is the most important currency.
Are gigs even more important for you now than ever before?
Yeah, especially after being ill. Like I've always been really grateful, because I came to music, personally speaking, relatively, like came to playing guitar relatively late. Anyway, I think it was about 19 when everybody else had been playing since they were like 13, 14. Gigs now are more important in the sense that people have less cash. Like anybody who's going out to a gig, people go out and work, or people have very little money that they want to treat themselves with to spend on a luxury. And I can't blame people if that luxury is Netflix and a load of, a carry out in the house, whether, takeaway or like a few beers or a bottle of wine or whatever. If that gives them joy and that gives them comfort, then that's cool. But because I do the same. But whenever you find people spending the money that they have to come and see you, it's a really humbling thing. So any gig, any music that I'm ever involved in where people come to your gig, that's a real sign that you're doing something right and that you should keep going.
What gigs have you got beyond that? People that can come and see, and where will they be?
We have just played a show in the Black Box for our album launch, but after that we're planning something very special for the Stendhal Festival in July in Limavady.
If someone's new to the wood burning savages, what 5 songs should they start with?
I would say, well, we have there's a song that we had on the first album called I Don't Know Why I Do It to Myself, and that one's definitely about maybe just hitting things a bit hard, hitting life a wee bit hard, and wondering why you don't have any cash and wondering why things aren't getting any better. But it's a bit of an uplifter as well. We've got a song called Lusitania. It sort of hits on a lot of the suicide epidemic that I was chatting about earlier. That one is definitely a song that we're between myself and Dan, that me and him sort of write the majority of the tunes and parts and lyrics and things. Very proud of that one. Another song I would like off this record, I would say A Thousand Mumbling Virgins, because it's a wee bit different. Like I like a lot of country music, a lot of Graham Parsons and all that sort of stuff, like old school Waylon Jennings and stuff. And I sort of had these grand notions in my head that song might be a country tune, but it sort of turned into a bit more of like an REM kind of thing. If REM leaned into the heavier side of things.
Yeah, that's a fair share, actually.
There's a song like these are. There's one that isn't up anywhere, so anybody that has it on a CD, it's probably the only people that are hearing it or can hear it. We had a song called Flu Season, which I think we're going to look at all the old recordings and maybe get them up online too. It's a wee song about we never write breakup songs, we never write love songs, but that one's sort of about going through a bad breakup. Really, that one's about just being sad. That it's over, sort of classic breakup song. Probably going to try and get that up online again. And what else? I would sort of say Monument Valley as well for anybody. Yep. Thank you. For anybody that likes a weird time signature sort of one. So
that's why I love it.
Yeah,
I love weird time signatures.
Dan and Mickey Woods, who was in the band when we recorded that one, and Elliot, Elliot's a big jazz sort of fan. Dan loves a load of prog rock, a load of Rush and stuff, and I do as well. And Mickey's a big Buffy Clyro fan and stuff as well. So I'm always kind of I'm always kind of like, right, where's the one? Where's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, whatever. But it's always good when somebody throws on a riff that's on a weird time signature, because then you can't forget it then whenever you hear it.
Yeah, it certainly pricked my ears up when I heard it, you know.
Mm. Aye, probably those five, I would say.
Good choices. You've been a big part of the Northern Irish music scene for years.
Mhm.
How do you see it in 2025? Is there any artists or bands that's catching your attention?
I there is. I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but there's Tuesday, which is Ethan Holland's project. So he's got some great songs. There's Pedal and Lever Society, which is it's kind of like a um, pedal steel and harp duo, and it's Joel Harkin and who else? Who else am I really liking at the minute? It's really healthy. Like there's loads of bands. I love thinking about Tramp as well in Derry and Donegal. Hypnic Jerk as well. Hypnic Jerk is one of those things that you do when you're about to fall asleep and you go Jesus and you have a big shake. But that's a guy called Philip Wallace who's doing this one man band thing, and he's playing the drums with his feet, and he's playing guitars, really huge Ty Segall fuzzy sounding guitars, and loads of pedals. But it sounds like the Beastie Boys. It sounds absolutely class. Who else? One more. Rua, Rebecca Mulhern from Derry. She's incredible. She's like if Joni Mitchell was from Derry. She really is. She plays guitar and all these different tunings, and she's got this incredible voice as well. So probably those. Like I tend to go for kind of folky things. You know, it's like a palate cleanser or something. Whenever whenever I'm kind of not doing Savage's stuff, but there's so many brilliant bands and brilliant solo artists at the minute as well. So yeah.
Yeah, there definitely is a lot of quality out there.
Hmm.
I like to ask my guests the following questions, just to wrap up.
Yep.
What song or album brings back the best memories for you?
Ah, best memories. What do we see? I could probably give you about 10 of them, but what do we see? Best memories. Oh, that's going to be really hard picking one here now.
You can pick a couple.
Pick a couple. What do we see? So Mitski's second album was an amazing one. And that I know that was only a few, or no, our third album was an amazing one. That sort of stuck with me. It's like Kate Bush sort of sounds and just amazing production. That just reminds me of going around Dublin whenever I first started seeing my partner, and we were going to a lot of gigs and just having a great time and everything. And what else? Probably Death from Above, 1979. I'm a man, you're a machine, because that just reminds me of being about 17 or 18, just jumping in somebody's car, going up to gigs in Belfast, or going down to Dublin, big fuzz rock sort of thing. And yeah, what else? What do we see? I'll pick one more. Bob Dylan, Blonde on Blonde, as well.
Good choice.
Yeah, it just reminds me of being a student, just rocking about the place and traveling and going to France and sort of meeting loads of new people and stuff like that as well. And there would always be the odd Dylan track playing in Sandino's in Derry as well. There used to be a great night there called Beatnik Soul, where bands from the States and all around Europe would tour and come and play in Derry, and you would always meet the craziest, weirdest, maddest people you'd ever met in your life, and we'd all go back to somebody's house and just be hanging out, playing records and having a beer and yeah, good times. I'm actually probably going to stick that on. I haven't listened to that in a couple of years.
Looking back over your musical journey, if you could relive one musical moment, what would it be?
Um, we were a fairly new band in 2014, which is a long time ago now. But we got asked to do Glastonbury, and whenever I was a classroom assistant at the time, and my phone kept ringing, And I picked up my phone. I was like, "Hello, who's this?" And heard this voice on the other end of the phone. It was an English voice, and I went, "Hi, how's it going? Is this Paul? Blah blah blah." And they were asking us, and I was like, "Hi, sorry, I'm just at work at the minute. Like, what? How can I help you? What's going on?" And they were like, "Oh, would you like to come and play Glastonbury?" And I thought, "Fuck off! Somebody's pranking me here. Like, fuck away off." And I think I hung up on them. I was like, "For fuck's sake," because like I've got a few friends who are really good at doing voices. And I love doing voices and impressions and stuff as well, but we would just crack each other up. And I thought it was one of them. And then I got this text saying, "Oh, here's my email address, here's my number, please ring me back. Sorry for disturbing you at work." And then I rang it back hours later. And anyway, long story short, we ended up going and playing Glastonbury for BBC Six Music. And I remember just thinking that I would probably like to play that gig again, but more so for the fact that once we finished the gig, I threw the guitar in the case and put it in the wee storage, and then went and seen as much music as I could have. But going back, I think I'd go play the gig, throw all my stuff in the storage area, and then go and see even more music. So it was just I walking around that, or actually the one that I would love to do again, which I mean, I know I said earlier we're playing stand hall, but there was a stand hall time, and I think it was the first time that we played it, and it was bucketing down, and I was terrified that there was going to be nobody there in the field for us, and I thought, oh shit, it's really raining now, and we're all looking at each other like, yep, yep. I wouldn't blame me if I didn't go up and play. And we got out there, and it was electric, like it was bucketing down, but everybody was there. It was a huge crowd, and people were giving it stacks, and they were just really up for the crack. And I mean, it was torrential, and like rain was getting on the stage, and it was just literally blowing right in on us. And people stayed for the whole set, and I was just like, "Wow, this is mad. This is crazy." So probably Stendhal. Yeah, that one was really special.
Brilliant. Finally, Paul,
Mhm.
what's next for the Wood Burning Savages? More touring? Is album 3 on the horizon?
I don't know. I don't know what's next. I think we kind of, after putting this record out, I think we're not the kind of band that like to just keep hammering away and hammering at people like, oh, this, big announcement coming soon, big things coming soon. I think as we get older, we're sort of appreciating, like I certainly am anyway, especially after the last couple of years, just being able to take time and write the thing that we're most proud of. So I would say for myself, I think I'm definitely gonna, and I already have begun that sort of process of writing songs, and after that, demoing tunes, and seeing what comes out then, because Stability and Hand to Mouth are two different records, but they're very similar in a lot of ways. And I think we want to do something different after these two, because we like so much music. And I like singing in a different way than I've sung on this album as well. Not to say that I like, I'm very very proud of those two albums and stuff, but I like singing in slightly softer and different ways as well. And I feel like that gets the message across to a different person's ear. Sometimes as well. So yeah, I mean, we're going to play Stendhal, and that's always class crack. And I think then it'll be a period of writing as well. It's getting hard for bands to afford to be able to tour, and
Yeah.
and venues are, like we all know, venues are sort of slipping away from us because of a lack of government um intelligence really around the ecosystem that music and the arts sort of live in. I think they think that it's like a regenerative sort of thing where somebody will just go, "Oh, that one closed. Well, I'll open another one." That's the most difficult thing I think anybody could do. So yeah, I think we're not in any rush to go on any big tours or anything. So definitely writing for a wee while.
Yeah, well, you've certainly evolved from stability to hand to mouth. So I'm really excited about what you're saying. You're going to evolve even more with the next record. It'll be very interesting. I would really look forward to hearing that.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
So for anybody listening that wants to buy hand to mouth or stability,
Yep.
where can they get it?
So we've got a shop on our website, thewoodburningsavages.com. You can pick up physical copies if you're ever in Cool Discs, which is Derry's independent record shop. It's on Foyle Street. And yeah, just through that as well. I'm going to try and get some records into that shop that you're talking about in the Beers Bridge Road that I can't remember the name of right now. But it's a class shop. So I want to have a wee chat with them about getting some records on as well. But definitely online on our website. And I think that's my evening. I'm going to open a bottle of wine, have a glass of wine. I'm going to listen to Blonde on Blonde, and I'm going to package up this stack of vinyl beside me as well.